Alright, so we're making another help video here for a weird order of operations problem. So we've got this problem written down as 1 times -4 minus 8 times 9 divided by -3. The first thing that we don't really like about this is the way that the multiplication is being represented. Right? We don't really like the x's for multiplication. On the computer, it's okay, but as we try to write it, it's not great. So I'm going to make these into dots, right? The first thing we're going to do is rewrite into dots. We could rewrite this into plus a negative if we wanted to, right? So we could make it plus -8. Now, there were no exponents in this problem, right?
Hey, I'm going to open this back up and you're going to watch me while I watch this class while I go get my computer fixed.
Oh, yeah? What's funny is I'm recording, so you saying that is in there, which is great.
Hello.
So, all my recordings are very real deal stuff. But I am going to pause this while I try to see if this student is done with it. All right, I got rid of that student, and now we're ready to continue. So I put this in parentheses just because it doesn't need to be, and it wasn't originally. So if we look for our PEMDAS ladder, right, and we look for parentheses, that shouldn't really count since I put those parentheses in. Although we can go ahead and do it if we want to, because there's no exponents. The next thing we're going to get to is multiplication division. But, and this is what throws some kids off, this is multiplication. But before we can really multiply this value times this value, we need to simplify what this value is. So the whole point of me putting the parentheses in here, and that is the associative property, which we've talked about in some classes, and other classes we haven't yet. You don't have to know it yet. But the associative property says that we can put in parentheses to help organize our problem. And we'll talk more formally about that when we get to it. But if I go ahead and do that division to simplify that fraction, 9 divided by -3, I have one negative number, so it's going to be negative. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. So does that make sense how I simplified that into -3? Awesome. Then we carry down everything else. Since that step I was really just simplifying. Now we're really looking for the multiplication division working left to right. So I have multiplication right here. Well, what does 1 times something do? It does... yeah, it does nothing, right? Multiplying by 1 leaves things alone. It does nothing. It doesn't change anything. So we get -4 plus -8 times -3. So now, working left to right, we still have another multiplication to look at. And this is a negative times a negative, right? What's a negative times a negative going to give us? A positive. So we know that this answer is going to be positive. I'm going to put a little plus just to remind myself, because there's a lot to keep track of. And then 8 times 3, 8, 16, 24. So now we have a -4 and a 24. So good guy, bad guy, right? Because the and here, we have a bad guy and a good guy. Well, they don't team up. They fight against each other, right? So who wins? Yeah, the positive by 20. Does that make a bit more sense now? Now, is that what you had gotten the first time, or is that a different answer? The one general note of caution was if there was an exponent involved on the 8, we would not change this to a negative until after we did the exponent, right? So one little note of warning. The reason that I was allowed to do this and it doesn't mess anything up is that there's no exponent on the 8. So I can just go ahead and put that with it. If there was an exponent, do that first, and then later put the negative with it, or just leave it as a minus. We could actually just leave it as a minus if we wanted.